It was a moment that could break any heart, a phone call you never want to hear, and a crisis that no amount of wealth, fame, or royal status could shield you from. Thomas Markle, the estranged father of the Duchess of Sussex, was fighting for his life. At 81 years old, a man who had survived heart attacks, a stroke, and even an earthquake, was now facing a medical emergency so severe that it left his family in shock. His foot had turned black. A blood clot had spread rapidly, threatening not just his leg, but his life. A 3-hour surgery was performed to remove what was left of his lower leg, but doctors warned that the next few days could decide whether he lived or died. And in the middle of all this, the woman he fathered, the one he had not seen in years, had yet to make a single call. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine sitting in a hospital waiting room, watching your loved one struggle under the weight of life and death decisions, and knowing that the person who could have made it a little easier, their child, is choosing silence. Now imagine that child is not just anyone. She is a duchess, a public figure, someone whose every move is scrutinized by millions around the globe. And still, she remains unreachable. This is the scenario that has gripped the Markle family, and the drama is far from over. But what made it even more shocking, the part that has set royal watchers and media outlets into a frenzy, is the alleged intervention of Prince Harry. Harry, known for his fierce loyalty to family, reportedly issued a warning, a threat, even, to Meghan Markle. The ultimatum was simple, yet devastating. Visit your father in his time of need, or face consequences that could alter everything for your family and your public image. What could those consequences be? The speculation alone has sent shockwaves through social media and tabloid news. No one wants to imagine the fallout, yet everyone is talking about it. The situation is complicated, to say the least. Thomas Markle has been estranged from Meghan since 2018. He has never met his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet. Over the years, tensions between them have been amplified by media coverage, miscommunications, and private grievances that spilled into public view. Thomas has made his feelings clear. He loves his daughter, even if he disagrees with some of her choices. But love, it seems, is being tested in a way that no family ever wants to experience. The stakes are more than just emotional. They are medical, urgent, and terrifyingly real. Doctors have emphasized the critical nature of Thomas Markle's condition. After discovering the blood clot in his lower leg, they rushed him to a larger hospital in Cebu, the Philippines, where they performed scans, ultrasounds, and ultimately, a life-saving amputation below the knee. But it doesn't end there. He still has a blood clot in his left thigh, meaning the danger is far from over. Infection, sepsis, and further complications are all very real threats. The medical team has warned that the next 2 to 3 days are crucial. It is a ticking clock scenario, and every hour could make the difference between survival and tragedy. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle remains silent. No calls, no messages. In the public eye, she continues her work, attends events, and maintains a polished presence. But privately, her father lies in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. The contrast is stark, almost unimaginable, and it is this gap, the silence, the estrangement, the tension, that has become the centerpiece of an unfolding royal drama. Questions swirl. Why hasn't she reached out? Is it fear, resentment, pride, or something more complicated? And how much does Prince Harry's involvement change the equation? Harry's alleged intervention adds a layer of intensity that no one could ignore. Known for his protectiveness of family, he reportedly threatened Meghan to ensure she visits her father. Sources suggest he was blunt. This is a matter of life and death, and ignoring it could have serious consequences. The nature of those consequences remains a closely guarded secret, yet the rumors alone have fueled global curiosity. For anyone watching, it raises a stark question. When does love cross the line into pressure, and when does silence become betrayal? This is more than just a family dispute. It is a collision of personal loyalty, medical emergency, and public scrutiny. Every decision, every delay, carries weight. Every emotion is amplified by the fact that the family involved is not ordinary. These are not private citizens dealing with private pain. These are royals, celebrities, and global figures whose every action or inaction is magnified for the world to see. And yet, the core of the story is heartbreakingly human. A father in need, a daughter who has withdrawn, and a son-in-law determined to intervene. Thomas Markle's children have spoken out, revealing the depth of their worry. Thomas Jr., his son, described the sudden deterioration in his father's condition. The moment his foot turned blue, then black, and the decision to operate became urgent. Samantha Markle, his daughter, has voiced prayers and hopes that her father is strong enough to survive this ordeal. Their words paint a picture of fear, resilience, and an enduring hope that love can bridge even the widest chasms. And through all of this, the clock ticks. The next hours are critical. Doctors have warned about infection risks, and while the initial surgery was successful, the danger is far from gone. Thomas's life hangs in the balance, and the decisions made in these moments could reverberate for years to come. The question on everyone's mind is simple, yet profound. Will Meghan finally step forward and reach out to her father, or will silence continue to define their fractured relationship? It's a story of urgency and emotion, of loyalty and estrangement, and of the extraordinary lengths people will go to protect their loved ones. And at the center of it all is a choice that Meghan Markle may have to make sooner than she ever anticipated. One call, one visit, one message could change the trajectory of this crisis. But will she act? And if not, what is Prince Harry prepared to do? This is the question that sets the stage for everything that follows. Because while the world watches the drama unfold from afar, the real stakes are painfully clear: a man's life, a family's fractured bonds, and a series of decisions that could redefine relationships forever. The tension is palpable, the consequences are severe, and the answers are nowhere in sight. When Thomas Markle first noticed something was wrong with his leg, it was subtle at first. A twinge of pain, a strange discoloration, a heaviness that seemed to come out of nowhere. But what began as a small inconvenience soon escalated into a crisis that would shock even those closest to him. One morning, he looked down and saw that his foot had turned a deep, alarming shade of blue. Within hours, it darkened further, creeping into blackness, a visual warning sign that something was dangerously wrong inside his body. For a man who had survived so much, 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and even an earthquake, this was a new, terrifying chapter. And this time, it was life or death. Thomas Jr., his son, remembers the panic vividly. "I took him to a local hospital immediately," he said, his voice trembling as he recounted the harrowing hours. "They did some scans, an ultrasound, and told us the leg had to be amputated. There was no option. It was literally a case of life or death." Imagine being in that moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on you. You are told that to save his life, part of your father must be removed. It is not a hypothetical scenario. It is not something that can wait. It is a stark, unyielding reality that leaves even the strongest people reeling. Doctors quickly realized that the initial facility could not provide the level of care Thomas required. He was rushed to a larger hospital in Cebu, where specialists could handle the complexities of his deteriorating condition. The transfer itself was fraught with anxiety. Every minute mattered. Every delay increased the risk of infection, sepsis, and further complications. Thomas Jr. watched as his father was whisked away, hoping against hope that he would survive the journey and that the medical team would have the skills and resources needed to perform the life-saving procedure. The surgery that followed was intense and complex, lasting over 3 hours. The medical team worked tirelessly, carefully removing the dead tissue and amputating the lower portion of Thomas's leg. It was a delicate balance, a race against time, and every cut, every decision carried enormous weight. For Thomas, it was not just a physical ordeal, but an emotional one as well. The loss of a limb is not something one can prepare for. It is a confrontation with vulnerability, a stark reminder of mortality. And at 81, every risk is amplified, every complication more likely. Outside the operating room, Thomas's family waited in agonizing suspense. His children, Samantha and Thomas Jr., sat in the hospital corridors, exchanging nervous glances, trying to hold back fear that seemed impossible to contain. They knew the statistics, they understood the risks, and yet nothing could prepare them for the reality of watching someone you love undergo such a harrowing procedure. Every beep of a monitor, Every hurried step of a nurse or doctor heightened the tension. The hours dragged on, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle remained silent. She had not called. She had not sent a message. In a world where every move of a royal family member is analyzed, this silence was deafening. For Thomas, it must have been bewildering and heartbreaking. After years of estrangement, the emotional distance between father and daughter was now compounded by life-threatening circumstances. The absence of contact from Meghan became a weight on everyone in the room, a tension that made the already dire situation feel even heavier. During the surgery, the doctors faced more than just the removal of the lower leg. They had to consider the risk of infection, the potential spread of blood clots, and the overall frailty of Thomas's health. At 81, with a history of heart attacks and a stroke, his body was fragile, and every complication could spiral into a life-threatening event. The team operated with precision and care, aware that the next few days would be critical in determining whether Thomas would recover or face even more severe consequences, including the possible loss of his remaining leg. Thomas Jr. recalls the moment he was allowed to speak to his father briefly after the operation. "He was brave, stronger than I could have imagined," Thomas Jr. said. "But you could see the fear in his eyes. He knew it was only the beginning. The doctors warned us. This was just the first step. The next 2 or 3 days are critical. Infection, sepsis, gangrene, any of these could become fatal." The weight of those words is almost unimaginable. Even with the surgery completed, the danger had not passed. In fact, it had only intensified. Every moment became a battle, not just against the physical complications, but against the looming uncertainty that hung over the entire family. Samantha Markle, Thomas's daughter, has been vocal about her fears and hopes. "He is a strong man, but he has been through so much," she said. "I am praying that he is strong enough to survive this. My father has been through 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and an earthquake. I hope he can pull through this." Her words capture the fragility of the situation. They are both a testament to Thomas's resilience and a reminder that even the strongest individuals can be brought to the brink by unexpected medical crises. What makes this story even more complex is the interplay of family dynamics. Thomas Markle has been estranged from Meghan since 2018. The wounds of the past, unresolved conflicts, and public scrutiny have all contributed to a distance that now seems insurmountable. Yet, in a moment like this, the human need for connection and support is undeniable. The absence of Meghan's contact looms over the narrative like a shadow, raising questions that no one can yet answer. Why has she remained silent? How does Harry's involvement factor into her decision-making? And what will it take for reconciliation, if reconciliation is even possible? The surgery, while successful in removing the immediate threat posed by the dead tissue, was just the beginning. Thomas now faces a long and difficult recovery. The physical pain will be intense. The emotional strain will be immense. And the uncertainty about his remaining health will weigh on him every day. The doctors continue to monitor him closely, aware that the next 48 to 72 hours could determine whether he walks or survives again. And then there is the looming question of Meghan Markle's response. Prince Harry's alleged ultimatum adds a layer of urgency and tension that cannot be ignored. Reports suggest he has made it clear to Meghan that ignoring her father's condition is not an option. The stakes are high, and the potential consequences are serious. This is no longer a private family matter. It is a critical junction where life, loyalty, and public perception collide. As Thomas recovers in the hospital, his children and medical team watch every hour with anxiety and hope. They are waiting not just for physical healing, but for a sign that family bonds can be mended, that love can overcome distance, and that Meghan will finally step forward. The next steps are uncertain, and the choices made in the coming days will have repercussions far beyond the hospital walls. But what no one could have predicted, what added a new twist to an already tense scenario, is what happened next. The moments after surgery were quiet, tense, and full of anticipation. The family waited, the medical team prepared for complications, and the world outside speculated. And then, a development occurred that changed the entire dynamic. The word estranged doesn't begin to capture the distance that has grown between Thomas Markle and his daughter Meghan over the past several years. It is more than just a lack of contact. It is the accumulation of misunderstandings, public scrutiny, and personal grievances that have quietly but steadily widened a chasm between father and daughter. For Thomas, a man who has endured far more than most, heart attacks, a stroke, the loss of independence, and even natural disasters, the emotional toll of being cut off from his child has been almost unbearable. And now, with his life hanging in the balance, the weight of estrangement presses down harder than ever. The story of Meghan and Thomas's estrangement is rooted in a complex mix of family dynamics, media exposure, and unmet expectations. Their relationship began like any other, parent and child navigating the ordinary challenges of growing up, of finding mutual respect and understanding. But it changed dramatically as Meghan's career and public profile skyrocketed. As the future Duchess of Sussex, Meghan became a figure under constant scrutiny, every choice dissected and debated by the media and public alike. For Thomas, who was not prepared for the relentless glare of global attention, this was overwhelming. Over time, small disagreements and differences in perspective escalated, magnified by headlines and social media, until communication broke down entirely. By 2018, the rupture was complete. Public statements and media coverage made it clear that Thomas had no contact with his daughter, and Meghan appeared to have moved on, fully immersed in her new life in the public eye and within the royal family. But the silence was not for lack of love. Thomas has repeatedly emphasized that, despite their differences, he would always love his daughter. "I will always love her," he told the press, even while acknowledging that he did not approve of some of her decisions. There is a tension here that is deeply human: love without connection, affection without presence. Samantha Markle, Thomas's daughter and Meghan's half-sister, has been more vocal about the emotional fallout of estrangement. She has described the anguish of watching a parent suffer, of being unable to bridge a gap that has widened over years of silence. "It's heartbreaking," she said. "We just want her to reach out, to let him know that he is not alone. But he is fighting for his life, and she hasn't made contact. It's hard to understand." Her words illustrate the emotional strain that extends beyond Thomas himself, affecting siblings, extended family, and even the public perception of the family as a whole. The emotional stakes of estrangement are heightened when the estranged party is facing a life-threatening crisis. In Thomas's case, the urgency of his medical situation underscores the depth of the divide. His amputation, the risk of infection, and the potential for further complications create a backdrop of extreme vulnerability. And yet, Meghan's silence continues to echo across continents, a stark reminder of the fractured relationship. It raises a difficult question: how does one reconcile love with disappointment and affection with distance? To understand the estrangement fully, it's important to examine the events that contributed to it. Meghan's rise to international fame brought not just attention, but intense scrutiny. Thomas Markle, though proud of his daughter, found himself drawn into the media spotlight in ways he was not prepared to handle. Every statement he made, every interaction captured by the press, became fodder for global commentary. The pressure to conform to public expectations, to present a unified front, and to navigate a world that had become unforgiving and judgmental created a strain that ultimately fractured communication. Add to that personal grievances. Thomas has publicly criticized some of Meghan's decisions, particularly regarding how the family managed media coverage and interactions with the royal household. While these comments may have been intended as honest, they were interpreted by some as attacks, further widening the gap between them. What might have once been private disagreements became very public, and in doing so, made reconciliation more difficult. The public nature of their conflict has made every interaction, or lack thereof, fraught with consequence, amplifying the emotional complexity of the estrangement. Despite all this, Thomas's love for Meghan has never wavered. Even after years of silence and public disputes, he continues to express hope that reconciliation is possible. "I will always love her," he says, not as a statement of obligation, but as a declaration of enduring affection, even in the face of disappointment. This tension, between enduring love and prolonged silence, is at the heart of the estranged father-daughter relationship. It is a reminder that family bonds, no matter how frayed, often carry a weight that public appearances cannot erase. In the midst of this estrangement, Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet, add another layer of complexity. Thomas has never met them. The grandchildren he has longed to know are, for now, symbols of a family life from which he is excluded. The absence of this connection adds urgency to the current crisis. The hospital room, the waiting, the fear of losing a loved one. It all converges with the knowledge that a simple gesture, a phone call, could bridge a gap that has seemed insurmountable. Yet that gesture remains absent, leaving family, observers, and even Meghan herself to grapple with the consequences of distance and silence. The psychological effects of estrangement are profound. For Thomas, the stress of being cut off from his daughter may have compounded his health challenges. Stress, anxiety, and emotional strain can exacerbate existing medical conditions, and in a situation as critical as this, they become part of the life and death equation. The emotional dimension is inseparable from the physical. Each moment of worry, each pang of longing for connection, adds pressure that affects the body as much as the mind. Meanwhile, Meghan faces her own pressures. She is caught between personal choices, public expectations, and now, her father's urgent medical crisis. The estrangement has created a paradox. A daughter who loves her father, yet who may be constrained by fear, guilt, or personal reasons from reaching out. Prince Harry's alleged intervention adds yet another layer, a mix of urgency and pressure that forces decisions that cannot be postponed. It is a delicate dance of loyalty, obligation, and personal autonomy, and every step carries consequences. For the outside world, this estrangement is a source of fascination. Fans, media outlets, and royal watchers have analyzed every past interview, every public statement, and every social media post to try to decode the dynamics of this fractured relationship. But at the heart of it all is a simple, universal truth. Families are complicated. Distance, misunderstandings, and disagreements can fester over time. But when a crisis strikes, the human desire for connection often surfaces in the most urgent ways. The challenge lies in overcoming pride, fear, and unresolved conflict to act in a moment that could define the course of a life. The stakes in this story are extraordinary not just because of celebrity status, but because of timing. Thomas's medical condition is critical, and the next 48 to 72 hours could be decisive. Yet the underlying estrangement means that the personal and emotional choices Meghan faces are fraught with complication. Every moment she hesitates is a moment of risk, not just to her father's health, but to the bonds that remain between them. It is a powerful reminder that, no matter one's position or prominence, the human elements of love, loyalty, and fear remain central to life's most pressing dramas. Samantha Markle captures this tension perfectly when she reflects on the family's predicament. He has been through so much, and yet now, more than ever, he needs his family. We just want her to reach out, to make one call that could mean everything. It's not just about reconciliation, it's about life and death. Her words highlight the emotional and moral gravity of the situation, underscoring how estrangement can transform ordinary challenges into crises of enormous consequence. As the hours tick by in the hospital, the absence of Meghan's contact looms over the family. The gap between them, formed over years of distance and disagreement, has never felt so pressing, so immediate, or so impossible to ignore. At the same time, the world watches with bated breath, captivated by a story that blends fame, family, and crisis into a narrative that feels both extraordinary and deeply human. And yet, despite the estrangement, despite the silence, and despite the fear, a turning point is on the horizon. One intervention, one message, one decision could shift the course of events in a way that no one expects. Prince Harry's alleged ultimatum is just the beginning, and what comes next promises to challenge loyalties, test resolve, and redefine the bonds between father and daughter in ways that neither could have foreseen. Prince Harry is not a man known for silence when family is at risk. Fiercely loyal, protective, and at times unrelentingly direct, Harry has always taken the role of guardian seriously, particularly when it comes to those he loves. But even he could not have predicted the storm that would descend when Thomas Markle, his father-in-law, faced a life-threatening medical crisis while Meghan Markle, his wife, remained unreachable. Suddenly, a private family drama became a moment demanding intervention. And Harry reportedly stepped in, determined to bridge the gap that had grown dangerously wide. The story begins with Harry learning about the severity of Thomas's condition. Through a series of calls and messages from family members in the Philippines, he was made aware that Meghan's father was not only undergoing a complex amputation, but also facing a precarious recovery, with doctors warning that the next 48 to 72 hours were critical. The details were grim. A blood clot in the lower leg, spreading risk to the thigh, and the looming threat of infection, sepsis, or further amputation. Every second counted, and every delay could carry irreversible consequences. For Harry, the situation was more than alarming. It was a call to action. Harry's involvement in this crisis was reportedly more than a simple suggestion or expression of concern. Sources suggest he issued what has been described as a stern warning to Meghan. The message was clear. Visit your father in his time of need, or face consequences that could ripple through both personal and public spheres. Though the exact details of the ultimatum have not been disclosed, insiders indicate that Harry's approach was firm, direct, and unyielding. This is a man who, when confronted with danger or injustice, has never hesitated to act. And now, he was confronting a situation where his family's loyalty, reputation, and emotional well-being were at stake. The timing of Harry's intervention is significant. By stepping in at this precise moment, he underscored the gravity of the situation. He was not merely reacting to a medical emergency. He was responding to the complex emotional dynamics that had defined the Markle family for years. Estrangement, unresolved disputes, and the pressures of public life had created a delicate and tense situation. Harry's involvement was intended not just to compel action, but to protect, guide, and, if possible, repair a fractured family bond before tragedy struck. But what makes Harry's intervention so compelling is the duality of its nature. On one hand, it is a deeply personal act of protection motivated by love and concern for his wife and her father. On the other hand, it carries a layer of tension and pressure that complicates matters. When someone steps in and issues an ultimatum, it is never just a request. It is a challenge, a confrontation, and, in some ways, a test of loyalty and resolve. For Meghan, this moment was fraught with complexity, balancing her emotional response to her father's crisis, her own personal considerations, and the reality of being confronted by a husband whose determination is absolute. Harry's history of standing up for family adds context to this moment. From his protective instincts toward his brother and father to his public advocacy for mental health and vulnerable communities, Harry has consistently demonstrated a willingness to act decisively when those he loves are at risk. This pattern of behavior makes his intervention in Meghan's family crisis unsurprising, yet it also magnifies the stakes. This is not an idle threat or casual suggestion. It is the action of someone who has weighed the consequences and decided that inaction is unacceptable. The emotional dimension of Harry stepping in cannot be overstated. This is a man caught between empathy, urgency, and frustration. On one hand, he recognizes the humanity in Meghan's hesitations, the difficulty of confronting a strained family relationship, the emotional complexity of estrangement, and the public scrutiny that accompanies every move. On the other hand, he understands the raw, pressing reality. Thomas Markle's life may depend on immediate action, and silence or delay could carry devastating consequences. This tension, this collision of personal emotion and urgent necessity, creates a dramatic backdrop that few outside the family could fully comprehend. Insiders have described Harry's approach as firm yet caring. He is said to have reminded Meghan of the stakes. Not in a punitive way, but in a way that emphasized the moral and familial responsibility at hand. It was a reminder that while estrangement may have defined the past, crisis creates opportunities for connection, reconciliation, and acts of love that transcend pride and fear. Harry's role, in this sense, was as both protector and mediator, navigating the delicate balance between urgency and empathy. At the same time, Harry's intervention has sparked speculation and debate among royal observers, media analysts, and the public. Questions abound. Was it appropriate for him to step into a private family matter? Could his approach be perceived as pressure or even coercion? And most importantly, would it succeed in motivating Meghan to reach out to her father? These questions, while speculative, underscore the intensity of the moment and the complexity of intervening in family dynamics under extraordinary circumstances. Harry's involvement also adds a new layer to the narrative of estrangement. Up until now, the story had been defined by distance, silence, and unresolved conflict. With Harry's intervention, the stakes are raised. This is no longer a quiet, private struggle. It has become a tense, urgent drama where every choice has immediate consequences. For Meghan, the decision to act, or not, carries weight not only for her relationship with her father, but for the emotional stability of her family and the perception of her role as a daughter, mother, and public figure. As the hours passed, Harry's presence in the story created pressure that was both moral and practical. He was a reminder of the human stakes, of the consequences that come from inaction. And yet, even with his intervention, Meghan's response remained uncertain. Would she reach out to her father? Could she bridge the years of silence and conflict in time to make a meaningful difference? Or would the weight of estrangement, pride, and complexity override urgency? The psychological and emotional intensity of this moment is profound. For Harry, there is likely a mixture of frustration, concern, and hope. For Meghan, the decision is fraught with emotional weight, balancing loyalty, fear, guilt, and love. And for Thomas Markle, the unfolding drama adds another layer to the already critical medical situation. The family is caught in a perfect storm of urgency, emotion, and unresolved conflict, each element amplifying the stakes of the others. Insiders have noted that Harry's intervention may have been the turning point that the family needed. By stepping into the crisis, he has transformed passive concern into active engagement. He has signaled that the situation is too important to ignore, and that immediate action is not just preferable, but necessary. It is a reminder of the unique pressures and responsibilities that come with being part of a high-profile family, where personal crises are intertwined with public scrutiny and moral imperatives. And yet, even with this intervention, the path forward is uncertain. The next steps hinge on Meghan's response, the medical realities of Thomas's condition, and the emotional navigation of a family fractured by years of distance and conflict. Every hour counts, and the choices made now will define not just the immediate outcome, but the trajectory of relationships for years to come. The drama, however, is far from over. What comes next is a series of decisions, conversations, and revelations that could reshape the family dynamic entirely. Harry's intervention has set the stage for a confrontation that is as emotional as it is urgent, as public as it is deeply private. The question now is simple, yet impossible. How will Meghan respond? And what will happen if she fails to act in time? The next chapter will explore the public reaction, Meghan's continued silence, and the emotional fallout from Harry's intervention. The story is building toward a crescendo, with stakes that extend far beyond the hospital walls, into family relationships, public perception, and the very survival of Thomas Markle. The world watched, waited, and wondered. As news of Thomas Markle's life-threatening amputation spread, one thing became painfully clear. Meghan Markle had not yet made contact. No phone call, no message, no sign that she was reaching out to her father in the critical hours following surgery. In a story already marked by estrangement, her silence became the most talked-about element, dominating headlines, social media threads, and late-night discussions across the globe. The question on everyone's mind was simple, yet devastating. Why? Silence is a powerful thing. It can be protective, strategic, or even a reflection of inner conflict. But in a moment of crisis, silence can also feel like abandonment, a choice that speaks louder than words ever could. For Thomas Markle, lying in a hospital bed after a life-altering surgery, Meghan's absence was not just noticeable, it was a wound in itself. Years of distance had already taken a toll, but this, in the midst of a medical emergency, intensified the pain exponentially. Every second without contact reinforced the estrangement, and every passing hour made reconciliation feel more urgent. and more fragile. Media outlets immediately seized on the story. The juxtaposition of Meghan's polished public appearances with her father's private suffering created a narrative that was irresistible to the press. Headlines framed the situation in dramatic terms. Meghan Markle silent as father battles for his life. Duchess refuses contact with estranged father during hospital crisis. And royal silence amid family emergency. Each headline fed curiosity and judgment, creating an atmosphere of speculation that ranged from concern to condemnation. Social media erupted with commentary, a mix of empathy for Thomas, criticism of Meghan, and debate over family loyalty. Hashtags trended, threads grew to thousands of comments, and public opinion became a swirling mix of outrage, disbelief, and fascination. The situation highlighted a cruel reality of modern fame. When personal matters become public, every decision, or lack of decision, is scrutinized under a microscope. For Meghan, her silence was no longer just a private choice. It was a global spectacle, and every moment of inaction carried a heavy weight. But silence is rarely simple. Behind the headlines and social media debates lie complex emotions, motivations, and fears. Meghan's lack of contact may not be rooted in malice. Estrangement is often tangled with layers of guilt, resentment, fear, and uncertainty. After years of fractured communication, a crisis can trigger hesitation, anxiety, and the question of how to act in a way that feels right, both morally and emotionally. How does one bridge a gap that has grown over years, even decades? How do you navigate a relationship that has been damaged by public scrutiny and personal disagreement, while facing a parent's potential death? The public narrative, however, rarely accounts for nuance. Observers painted Meghan's silence as cold, calculated, or even cruel. They questioned her priorities, her loyalty, and her humanity. Comments ranged from sympathetic, acknowledging the complexity of estranged relationships, to harsh, demanding that she make immediate amends. Every public appearance she made in the days following the surgery, no matter how innocuous, was interpreted as evidence of neglect, creating a narrative of tension, drama, and emotional dissonance. Meanwhile, inside the hospital in Cebu, the silence weighed heavily on Thomas Markle. He had always loved his daughter, despite their disagreements and distance, and now, facing the fragility of life, the absence of her voice, her reassurance, or even a simple acknowledgement became an additional burden. For Thomas Jr. and Samantha, the waiting was excruciating. They watched their father recover from a major operation, knowing that emotional connection might be just as vital as medical intervention. And in every moment of waiting, they wondered, will Meghan act before it's too late? Adding complexity to the story was Prince Harry's role. His intervention, initially intended to prompt action, only heightened scrutiny. If Meghan reached out, it could be seen as a response to pressure. If she did not, speculation about family conflict would intensify. Every possible outcome carried consequences, and Harry's involvement ensured that personal decisions were inseparable from public perception. The pressure on Meghan was immense, not just from family obligations, but from a world watching her every move. Public reaction extended beyond news headlines and social media. Commentators, royal analysts, and talk shows dissected every possible motive. Was Meghan avoiding confrontation because of lingering resentment toward Thomas? Was she fearful of media exploitation or public criticism? Was it a question of pride, guilt, or emotional overwhelm? Theories multiplied, often contradicting each other, creating an almost unbearable level of speculation that neither Meghan nor her family could fully control. But the silence also revealed a deeper truth about human behavior in moments of crisis. Estranged relationships are fraught with history, emotion, and complexity. They do not respond predictably to urgency or threat. Sometimes, silence is a coping mechanism, a way to manage overwhelming emotions. Sometimes, it is a reflection of fear or unresolved conflict. And sometimes, it is the pause before a decision that will change everything. In Meghan's case, the reasons remained unclear, but the stakes could not have been higher. Even medical professionals recognized the impact of emotional stress on recovery. Thomas Markle's surgery, while technically successful, was just the beginning. The next phase of healing would demand not only physical resilience, but also emotional support. Experts note that family engagement, encouragement, and connection play a vital role in recovery, especially after major procedures like amputation. The absence of Meghan's contact was more than a personal matter. It was a factor that could affect outcomes in real and measurable ways. Amid this tension, the global audience waited. Public curiosity became a force of its own, feeding news cycles, social media threads, and ongoing speculation. Every rumor, every partial report, and every snippet of information was analyzed, amplified, and debated. The story evolved in real time, with Meghan's silence acting as both the central mystery and the catalyst for ongoing drama. Questions multiplied. Would she reach out before it was too late? Was Harry's ultimatum effective? Could a fractured relationship withstand the intensity of this moment? The emotional stakes were mirrored by moral and social considerations. Silence in a crisis is rarely neutral. It is interpreted, judged, and assigned meaning by others. For Meghan, the world's gaze transformed a personal decision into a moral drama. Every day without contact was a narrative waiting to be written, and public perception became a weight that compounded the already immense pressure. The complexity of fame, family estrangement, and life-threatening circumstances created a scenario where no choice could be made lightly. And yet, despite the scrutiny, the situation remained fluid. Estranged relationships are unpredictable, particularly when emotions run high and stakes are extreme. Meghan's response, or continued silence, would inevitably shape the next chapter of this story. Would it lead to reconciliation, regret, or further conflict? Only time would tell, and the suspense was palpable. In the coming hours, all eyes remained on Meghan. Would she answer the silent plea of a father fighting for his life? Would she heed Harry's intervention and take action before it was too late? Or would pride, fear, and history delay the inevitable confrontation? The tension between duty, love, and personal choice created a drama as compelling as it was human, a story that resonates far beyond the confines of celebrity and royalty. But what no one could anticipate was the moment that would finally break the silence. A turning point was approaching, one that would challenge loyalties, reveal hidden emotions, and set in motion events that could change the entire family dynamic. And when it came, the world would be watching. The hospital corridors were quiet, yet charged with an intensity that was almost tangible. Each beep of a monitor, each hurried footstep of a nurse, and each muffled conversation in the hallway carried weight. Inside room 302, Thomas Markle lay recovering from a major amputation, his body vulnerable, his mind heavy with fear and uncertainty. The physical pain was acute, but the emotional fallout, the weight of family conflict, estrangement, and silence, was perhaps even more profound. Thomas Jr. and Samantha paced the waiting area, their worry evident in every gesture. Every time a doctor emerged from the operating theater or the recovery room, they braced themselves for news, good or bad. The uncertainty was agonizing. They knew their father's life had been saved, at least for now, but the larger questions loomed. Would he recover fully? Could he regain mobility and independence? And, most pressingly, would Meghan finally reach out? For Thomas, the emotional impact of the crisis was layered and complex. Here was a man who had endured decades of personal challenges, heart attacks, a stroke, and the trauma of natural disasters, and yet he had never faced anything quite like this. The amputation was not only a physical loss, but also a stark confrontation with vulnerability, dependency, and mortality. At 81, every challenge feels magnified, and every setback carries consequences that ripple far beyond the hospital walls. But the surgery was only part of the story. Equally significant was the emotional atmosphere created by Meghan's silence. Estrangement is rarely a straightforward narrative. It carries with it a mixture of guilt, regret, pride, and longing. For Thomas, the absence of contact from his daughter during one of the most critical moments of his life was an emotional blow that deepened the ache of the physical injury. It raised questions about love, loyalty, and connection, questions that no medical team could answer. The hospital staff, trained to handle emergencies and critical care, also sensed the emotional intensity of the situation. Nurses and doctors who observed Thomas's interactions with his family noticed the strain of isolation, the longing for connection, and the profound impact of uncertainty. Emotional support, as many medical experts stress, is a critical component of recovery. Patients who feel cared for and connected often experience better outcomes, faster healing, and greater resilience. In this case, the absence of Meghan's voice or presence introduced a variable that could not be measured, yet was undeniably powerful. Thomas Jr. described the emotional landscape with unflinching honesty. "It's hard to watch him lying there, knowing he's vulnerable, knowing he needs support," he said. "We try to be there for him, but it's not the same. He needs his daughter. Every father wants that connection, especially now. The silence is almost unbearable." His words capture the tension between medical recovery and emotional needs, between family duty and fractured relationships. Samantha echoed these sentiments. She spoke about the heartache of watching her father endure pain while knowing that the emotional distance between him and Meghan is not just a result of geography, but years of unresolved conflict. "He's been through so much, and now he's fighting not just for his health, but for his family," she said. "We want him to feel supported, to feel loved, but that gap, her absence, makes everything harder." Her reflection highlights a truth that resonates universally. Physical healing is only part of the journey. Emotional connection is equally vital, and its absence can deepen suffering. The dynamics in the hospital also underscored the role of extended family in moments of crisis. Thomas Jr. and Samantha became the pillars of support, negotiating medical updates, coordinating care, and providing emotional reassurance. Yet even their efforts, as loving and dedicated as they were, could not replace the connection with a child long estranged. Their struggle illustrates the ripple effects of family estrangement. It affects not only the primary individuals involved, but also those who surround and support them. Amid this emotional fallout, the public dimension of the story added another layer of pressure. With every headline, every social media post, and every news segment dissecting Meghan's silence, the stakes extended far beyond the hospital room. Thomas, Samantha, and Thomas Jr. were acutely aware of the global attention, knowing that their personal suffering was being consumed by an audience that had its own interpretations and judgments. This dual reality, personal pain magnified by public scrutiny, added complexity to the already intense emotional environment. Doctors continued to monitor Thomas closely. The risk of infection, complications from the surgery, and the possibility of further amputation created a precarious balance. Each update was met with relief and anxiety in equal measure. But beyond the clinical indicators, the emotional climate mattered. Recovery, especially after a traumatic surgery at an advanced age, is influenced by psychological and emotional factors. Hope, connection, and reassurance are as critical as antibiotics or wound care. And in this case, the absence of Meghan, the very daughter whose presence could provide comfort, loomed large. The waiting, the worry, and the emotional strain began to take their toll on everyone in the room. Thomas's vulnerability highlighted the fragility of human life, the importance of family bonds, and the devastating impact of estrangement. Each conversation between the family members was tinged with a mixture of hope and fear. They clung to the idea that Meghan might still reach out, that reconciliation was possible even in the shadow of crisis. But every passing hour without contact increased the tension, leaving a sense of dread hanging over the hospital floor. In moments like these, even the smallest gestures can have profound significance. A text message, a brief phone call, or a simple acknowledgement could shift the emotional landscape. Yet Meghan's silence persisted, creating a paradox. Love and obligation remained, but action lagged behind, leaving the family to navigate the intersection of hope, fear, and frustration. It is a tension that resonates deeply with anyone who has experienced estrangement, a reminder that human relationships are rarely simple, predictable, or linear. For Thomas, the emotional fallout was compounded by the realization that time was limited. Every day, every hour, carried weight. The surgery may have saved his leg, but it did not erase the threat of complications or the need for emotional support. The fragility of his situation underscored the importance of connection, of family presence, and of reconciliation. And the longer Meghan remained silent, the more critical the moment became. turning a medical crisis into a moral and emotional dilemma. As the hours stretched on, the emotional stakes continued to rise. Thomas Jr. and Samantha faced the dual challenge of supporting their father while managing their own anxiety and hope. The pressure of global attention, coupled with the intimate dynamics of family care, created a unique crucible of emotion, drama, and tension. Every decision, every conversation, every action or inaction carried consequences that extended far beyond the immediate hospital room. And then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, a development occurred, one that shifted the dynamics in ways no one could have predicted. A message, a gesture, a decision. The catalyst that would begin to change everything was on the horizon. What it would be, who it would come from, and how it would alter the course of the unfolding drama remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. The emotional fallout in the hospital was reaching its tipping point, and the choices made next would define the trajectory of relationships, recovery, and family connection for years to come. The story in the hospital was far from over. Every heartbeat, every update, and every silent hour carried the potential to transform despair into hope or deepen the fractures of estrangement. And as the world outside watched and speculated, the family remained caught in a moment of raw, unfiltered human emotion, where love, fear, and obligation collided in ways that were as dramatic as they were inevitable. The air in the house was tense, thick with unspoken words and mounting pressure. Prince Harry, known for his unwavering determination and fierce protectiveness, had reached a point where gentle reminders were no longer sufficient. The crisis surrounding Thomas Markle had escalated to a level where hesitation could no longer be tolerated and silence could no longer be an option. Harry reportedly delivered what insiders describe as a stark ultimatum to Meghan Markle: visit her father in the hospital, or face consequences that would reverberate far beyond the walls of their home. The concept of an ultimatum is a powerful one. It carries with it a mixture of urgency, moral weight, and emotional leverage. In this case, Harry's intervention was not merely a suggestion. It was a direct confrontation with the reality of estrangement and a call to action under extraordinary circumstances. The stakes were clear. Meghan's father was fighting for his life after a major amputation, and her continued silence could have irreversible consequences. The pressure was immediate, intense, and deeply personal. What makes this ultimatum particularly striking is the duality of its nature. On one hand, it is protective. Harry's love and concern for both his wife and her father drive him to push for action. On the other hand, it introduces a confrontational element, a tension between autonomy and moral responsibility. Meghan, already navigating a complex web of emotions, public scrutiny, and family expectations, now faced a direct challenge from someone who shares her life, her children, and her most personal loyalties. The psychological stakes were immense. Insiders suggest that Harry's message was delivered in a manner that combined emotional appeal with firm insistence. He reportedly reminded Meghan of the critical state of her father's health, emphasizing that delay could have dire consequences. Yet he also underscored the human dimension. This was a chance to mend a fractured relationship, to be present in a moment that mattered more than pride, fear, or past grievances. The ultimatum was not just about duty. It was about love, responsibility, and the moral imperative to act when family is in crisis. The timing of this intervention is key. Thomas Markle's surgery had already been performed, but the next 48 to 72 hours remained critical for recovery. In that window, the presence or absence of family could have profound psychological and emotional effects. Harry recognized this and reportedly framed his ultimatum in terms that highlighted the stakes, both for Meghan's father and for the family's emotional cohesion. The pressure was real, the consequences tangible, and the moral imperative undeniable. For Meghan, the ultimatum introduced a complex set of emotions. Estrangement is rarely simple. It carries with it guilt, anger, fear, and unresolved grief. The request, or demand, to visit her father in his most vulnerable state was a confrontation with decades of family dynamics, public scrutiny, and personal hesitation. How does one act when the past is tangled with the present? When pride, fear, and obligation collide, the choices become fraught, the consequences profound, and the emotional intensity almost unbearable. The public perception of Harry's intervention also adds an important layer. As one of the most scrutinized members of the royal family, every action he takes is amplified, analyzed, and interpreted. Some observers framed the ultimatum as necessary, a protective act rooted in love and urgency. Others speculated that it could backfire, potentially pushing Meghan further into hesitation or creating additional tension in an already delicate situation. The optics were complex, the pressure relentless, and the stakes unprecedented. At the heart of the ultimatum lies a universal question. How far should one go to compel action in moments of moral or emotional urgency? Harry's position is clear. Inaction is unacceptable. But Meghan's hesitation reflects the human struggle of navigating loyalty, fear, and personal boundaries. It is a dramatic collision of moral responsibility and individual autonomy, one that resonates far beyond the confines of this specific family crisis. Insiders indicate that Harry's approach combined emotional appeals with concrete consequences. Reports suggest he conveyed that failure to act could result in long-term familial estrangement, moral regret, and perhaps even a public reckoning that could amplify media scrutiny. The ultimatum was not simply a threat. It was a calculated intervention designed to compel ethical, emotional, and practical action in a moment of crisis. The psychological intensity of such a confrontation cannot be understated. Studies on family estrangement show that urgent interventions in moments of crisis often generate both immediate stress and opportunities for reconciliation. The pressure to act can catalyze responses that might otherwise remain dormant, forcing individuals to confront fears, guilt, and unresolved emotions. For Meghan, the ultimatum represented both a test and an opportunity. An ethical, emotional, and familial challenge wrapped into one. The emotional stakes were compounded by Meghan's awareness of the public gaze. Every action, or inaction, was being observed, interpreted, and judged by a global audience. The pressure was not just personal but social, magnified by decades of media scrutiny and the constant attention that follows members of the royal family. In such circumstances, decisions are rarely simple, and the weight of potential consequences, emotional, moral, and reputational, can paralyze even the most resolute individuals. Yet within this tension lies the possibility for transformation. Ultimatums, while inherently confrontational, also create opportunities for decisive action. Harry's insistence, while intense, forced Meghan to consider the broader consequences of her choices. The potential healing of a fractured relationship, the moral satisfaction of acting in the face of crisis, and the emotional reassurance her father so desperately needed. In essence, the ultimatum became both a catalyst and a moral compass, pointing toward action when hesitation could no longer be tolerated. The impact of Harry's pressure extended beyond Meghan to the entire family network. Thomas Jr. and Samantha watched closely, aware that this intervention might finally prompt a response that had long been delayed. Their hope, tempered by years of estrangement and disappointment, was now intertwined with urgency. Every hour, every conversation, every decision mattered in a way that transcended ordinary family dynamics. The emotional weight was extraordinary, and the potential for resolution, or further fracture, loomed large. As Meghan weighed her response, the tension reached a fever pitch. She faced a choice that would define not only the immediate future, but also the long-term trajectory of familial relationships, public perception, and personal conscience. The ultimatum had shifted the narrative from passive concern to active decision-making, transforming the crisis into a moment of moral reckoning. Would she act out of love, duty, guilt, or fear? Or would hesitation prolong estrangement and deepen emotional wounds? The drama was not confined to private spaces. Public speculation, media coverage, and social commentary amplified the tension, creating a backdrop in which personal decisions carried global resonance. Harry's ultimatum, while directed at a deeply personal matter, became a narrative event with consequences that reached far beyond the Markle family. It underscored the unique pressures of fame, responsibility, and human emotion when personal crises intersect with public scrutiny. And yet, despite the intensity of the ultimatum, uncertainty remained. How would Meghan respond? Would she heed Harry's insistence and confront the emotional and moral challenges of visiting her father? Or would hesitation, pride, or unresolved conflict delay the inevitable, leaving the family in continued suspense? The answers were unknown, and the tension remained almost unbearable. What is certain is that Harry's intervention had set the stage for a dramatic turning point. The ultimatum was more than a request. It was a confrontation with urgency, morality, and emotion that demanded action. The next steps would define the course of the crisis, shape relationships for years to come, and determine whether estrangement could finally give way to reconciliation or deepen beyond repair. The moment of truth had arrived. For weeks, the world had speculated, the media had debated, and the family had waited in agonizing uncertainty. Meghan Markle, estranged daughter of Thomas Markle, now faced a choice that carried extraordinary emotional, moral, and public weight. Would she break her silence, reach out to her father in his moment of crisis, and attempt to bridge the chasm that years of estrangement had carved? Or would hesitation, pride, and fear keep her distant, leaving her father to face recovery, and perhaps the lingering shadow of relational estrangement, alone? Breaking silence is never simple, especially in a situation as fraught as this. Estrangement carries layers of history, resentment, and unresolved conflict. It carries guilt for both sides, fear of judgment, and uncertainty about how words or actions might be received. For Meghan, the stakes were amplified by her public life, the scrutiny of a global audience, and the emotional weight of knowing that her father had just undergone a major amputation, fighting for his survival in a hospital thousands of miles away. Sources suggest that Meghan's internal struggle was intense. She reportedly wrestled with a flood of emotions. Grief for the years lost, guilt for the absence, fear of a confrontation that might reopen old wounds, and the pressing urgency imposed by her father's critical condition. This was more than a phone call. It was a reckoning, a moment where personal pride collided with moral obligation and